It has officially been over 2 years since the explosive end of Succession, since I Am the Eldest Boy, Baby Girl Kendo, since Succession Fashion closed its doors for good, since Conor Roy was interested in politics from a very young age, and since you can't make a omelet without breaking some eggs. Yet, Succession still remains near and dear in the cultural canon, because that's what happens when you really stick the landing on a TV show, unlike some others. Am I right? If you are a longtime lover of Succession and want to relive the good times, or if you simply want to know what the hype was all about, this video is for you, because this is more than a recap. This is what it felt like to be watching the show in real time. This is every inside joke, every behind the scenes, the socio-political analysis, the everything. I am uniquely qualified to make this video because I wrote this recap almost entirely from memory. I can't prove it to you, you're gonna have to take my word for it, but I have simply seen this show that many times. If I had to summarize the show for someone who's never seen it, which I will do in intensive detail, don't you worry, I would say exceedingly rich white family hates each other while dealing with nauseatingly privileged problems, dressing really well, and speaking as if they are in a modern-day rendition of a Shakespeare play. And also, Conor Roy was interested in politics from a very young age. Ultimately, let's answer the question of, was this the most important show of our time? But first, a spoiler warning. That's it, that's the warning. We are introduced to the Roy family, the owners of a very successful multi-billion-dollar media company called Worldbuilding, and it's definitely not based on the very real-life Murdoch family, which owns Fox News and is currently embroiled in their own battle over who is going to succeed Rupert Murdoch when he eventually steps down, or dies, whichever comes first. Worldbuilding even has its own Fox News. ATN. Logan Roy, the head of the Roy family and the current CEO of Worldbuilding, is seemingly planning on retiring soon because he is old as hell. And his son, Kendall, I Am the Eldest Boy Roy, is planning on taking over. Kendall Roy is played by the fantastic Jeremy Strong. He's very well known for both his advanced vocabulary.
I thought it made sense dramaturgically.
And his incredibly intense method acting, which Brian Cox, who plays Logan Roy, has actually called him out for.
He does get obsessed with the work, and I worry about what it does to him.
In the very first episode, Kendall Roy is attempting to close some business deal to acquire some media company that I assume is something like a BuzzFeed before heading off to his father's birthday lunch, in which he is informed that his father will not be retiring, and also that his dad wants to change the trust, the family trust that is. I was very confused about all this, okay? This is not going to be a recap of the business stuff. Money isn't real, all right? But he wants to include his new wife, Marsha. This is a plot point that is literally completely abandoned. After this episode, we meet the other Roy kids, Conor Roy, who is actually the eldest boy and is from a previous marriage from a previous wife of Logan's, who was very, very rarely mentioned. We never even meet her. And the actor who plays Conor is actually only 10 years younger than the actor who plays Logan Roy, but the acting is so good that they completely managed to nail the father-useless son dynamic.
Just wondering if I can hit you for like a little 100 mil.
A little 100 mil.
Yeah.
Well, maybe.
Roman Roy is the other brother of the Roy kids, and he is a juvenile-like delinquent who is deeply unserious and wants so badly to be taken seriously. He is played by the one, the only Kieran Culkin, who is almost playing himself.
I think you're a super talented superstar, and I love you.
Oh, you're such a
Only I could be as good as Kieran playing Roman. Oh. Because I feel like that's very fun. Yeah.
And then we have Siobhan Roy, who is the youngest of the family and works currently in this season as a political consultant for a liberal. This is the only season in which she wears her hair long, and she really is a different person. Season 1 of Succession is very different from the rest of the show. It just has different vibes. you know. In the very first episode, Logan has a stroke, and it turns out that they were originally planning on killing this character in the first episode, thus triggering the fight for succession. But Brian Cox's performance of Logan was so good that they just had to keep him. And thank goodness. I do not think the show would have worked without Brian Cox as Logan Roy, okay? The heart of the show is his dynamic with each of his kids and how it tears them apart and brings them together. And that unique dynamic is really what makes the show work and how interestingly the show chooses to explore. And we can't forget Cousin Greg.
Everybody, this is Craig, by the way. Cousin Craig.
Craig. It's Greg. No?
The grandson of Logan's estranged brother who shows up in the very first episode to beg for a job. Greg has to be one of the best cast characters I've seen in anything ever. It's so good. We also find out in this episode that Kendo is a recovering drug addict with 2 kids with his ex-wife who left him because of said drug addiction. So after they fight about money and then go play baseball, during which Roman plays a cool trick on this young boy whose family works for the Roys, which we move on from really quickly, in my opinion. Roman also has a wife and kids in the first episode, which they later choose to omit so they can make him a sexual pervert. But she's credited as his wife, and Shiv calls the kid that's with him his daughter. And the wife just turns into a girlfriend who leaves after a few episodes. Roman plays this cool trick on a kid whose parents work for the Roy family in the first episode, pretending that he's going to give him $1 million if he hits a home run. So the show is instantly establishing what kind of people it's really about and what kind of humor and messaging it's going to have. Logan has a stroke while on the helicopter coming back from the baseball game, which, I mean, we've all been there, right? And then they go to the hospital and proceed to freak out. Shiv's boyfriend, the iconic Tom, who is played by the even more iconic Matthew McFadden. Matthew, I want you to know, you were born to play Mr. Darcy, and it breaks my heart that you disagree. Proposes to her at the hospital, which could not be worse timing. We also get this hilarious scene of Shiv and Roman fighting at the hospital. And as a girl who also has 3 brothers, this is incredibly accurate. They argue over who's going to take over the company and how they're going to deal with the shareholders with Logan being out of commission. And they eventually land on Kendo being interim CEO despite his, everything.
You lack killer instinct. You're wet. You're green. You're intellectually insecure. You're not emotionally strong enough. You have addiction issues.
That's enough.
They move on from the stroke plotline as they have decided not to kill Logan, and then Kendo immediately tries to kill Logan again by staging and failing a hostile takeover. While Logan was on death's door, Kendo was informed that the company was in remarkable debt, and so he sold part of the company to his good friend Stewie.
I can trust you, right?
No.
Sure, but on money stuff, I can trust you?
No.
Who was actually working with Sandy, longtime business rival of Logan. He teams up with Sandy and Stewie, and Roman and Frank, who are executive board members, they're part of what we call the old guard, to have a vote of no confidence against Logan, which kind of justifies due to Logan's recent health issues. But he doesn't manage to show up to the meeting on time. I mean, come on, man. He runs off to Long Island right before the meeting to convince one of the board members who is literally sick and dying of cancer, which he should have done way before, 2 hours before the meeting, and he ends up not making it back in time. And then Stewie and Roman, because he isn't physically there, end up voting with Logan. Logan's brother even shows up, Ewan, to vote for Logan. Then Logan fires everyone who voted against him, which is half the board.
Have some doubt.
I'm in the middle of turning a fucking tanker! Yeah!
Meanwhile, Shiv is off doing her own thing this entire season. She's cheating on her new fiance with her ex, who wants her to start working with Congressman Miguel Evis, who is a sworn enemy of her dad. Shiv's liberal era was so funny. It was so fake. She's such a... Maybe that's what they mean by grifting. I still don't know what that word means, but I imagine it's something like this. Tom and Greg start working together, and they form a dream team, with Greg being Tom's new assistant. The Tom and Greg dynamic in the show is one of the best things it has to offer.
We talking to each other on the poop deck of a majestic schooner?
Is the salty brine stinging my weather-beaten face? No? Then why are you wearing a pair of deck shoes, man?
Oh, I'm driving my grandpa down for Thanksgiving.
Oh, Greg, your grandpa.
Okay, you're on speakerphone, Tom.
Well, I shouldn't be, Greg.
That was the only 2-hour period in which you did not send an email to Mr. Hirsch with the title, "You can't make a tomlet without breaking some Gregs." You sent the same email to him 67 times in one.
To you now? Are you asking if you can blackmail me? I can't reveal my sources. But it's Greg.
It's so funny because Tom instantly becomes a completely different person when he meets Greg. He gets moved over to head the cruise division, as he is also an executive at Waste Rokai, and they have to cover up this huge conspiracy insofar that the company apparently used to cover up horrendous crimes that would happen on their cruise ships by just going to some random country and paying off the police there. Tom makes Greg get rid of the evidence, and this is important, don't forget it, but he ends up deciding to keep a few files for himself because he's no idiot. Well, he is actually, but he's no idiot. After Logan fires half of the board, the family decides to do family therapy at Connor's ranch for PR.
I feel I need to check my emails.
It's not a feeling bad.
Maybe don't deny Dad's feelings, Shiv.
Kenny.
Connor is currently dating a former, turned actress, although not really, and she's hilarious, really. Her name is Willow. We love Willow. Willow can really hold her own with the Rowe family.
Thank you. Look how far you've come.
Yeah. Well, look at us both, right?
And the therapy goes as well as you'd expect. Kendall shows up after relapsing, and all hell breaks loose. Shiv decides that she is definitely going to go work for Gil after her dad says some not so nice things. Now, Kendall isn't done, okay? Kendall, baby girl boy, as he is known in the Succession community, because he does read as an emotionally unstable teen girl a lot of the times with those temper tantrums. He has a whole sad boy arc, but we'll get to that. It's coming up. He decides to stage an actual hostile takeover. I'm probably using that term wrong, and I've probably used it wrong before, but who cares? He and Stewie, who remembers, was working with Sandy, Logan's business rival, try to buy out Waystar Royco from Logan. He runs his big mouth to Frank, however, and it ends up being leaked to the press, so he has to present the papers right there and then at Shiv's wedding, which Logan almost doesn't make it to, but then changes his mind. And this, of course, upsets everyone. Right before Shiv's wedding, Tom also had a crazy bachelor party that was planned by, who else? Roman, where he delivers one of the best lines in the series.
Buckle up, f***head.
He also hooks up with this girl that Roman ends up bringing to the wedding as a joke. Her name was Tabitha. She was sick. We should have had more of Tabitha. We deserved more of her. Now, Shiv finds out about the cruise scandal and decides to blackmail the company with that information and uses it to broker some deal between her dad and Gil. On her wedding night, she decides to tell poor Tom that she actually wants an open marriage on their wedding night. On their wedding night, Roman is dealing with some rocket launch that goes terribly wrong, and Connor decides that he wants to run for president. Succession was unfortunately a shockingly accurate depiction of the modern-day era.
Connor Roy was interested in politics at a very young age.
And the show takes a crazy turn because Kendall kind of kills someone. He drives off with some British waiter. The wedding was in the UK because their mom is actually British, and she was also wonderfully cast. She is so funny and exactly the type of person who would marry Logan and raise the kids that they ended up having together.
You're asking how long you give it.
Just a cheeky icebreaker.
Okay, well, it's pretty fucking horrible.
It's not all about you, Shiv. Other people need something to say.
Kendall drives off with some British waiter because he wants to get drugs, and then they crash into the water, and he just leaves the poor kid there after some half-hearted attempt to get him out of the car, and then just goes back to the hotel. But then Logan finds out about this because of his security guard, and then he forces Kendall to renege on the bear hug. And that is the end of season 1. Season 1 was, in my opinion, different. They were clearly still figuring certain things out. They did, however, nail the tone of absurdist dark comedy humor, and they were putting all the pieces in place to build up these characters in a way that was going to make them very interesting to watch over the next couple of seasons. Everything was perfectly set up, the characters, the dynamics between them, and the stakes of the show, which are perfectly articulated in that there are none. They're so rich. They will be fine no matter what happens, but they don't actually care about that. They care about power, and that tells you so much about them as individual people. The characters are just delicious, and they play off of each other so well. It's so great. What's really interesting about Succession is how interesting each of the characters are. They suck, and they're supposed to. We aren't even really rooting for them, but we are obsessed with seeing what happens to them. Kendo is drawn back into Waystar, upsetting Sandy and Stewie and confusing everyone else. Logan decides to bring the family in to decide whether or not they should continue to fight this bear hug, or should they accept it, sell the company, just be rich and do nothing, which is pretty much what they're doing now. The only person who works in the show is Kendo's goddamn assistant. And to be fair, the old guard of Carolina and Hugo, characters who do press and pop in and out throughout the show. Tom also puts in work, eventually. He talks to the kids one by one, Logan, that is, and dun offers Shiv the role of CEO. Does he need it? Who knows? I personally think that he just wants to bring her in. He had no intention of actually giving her that role. They decide to keep it a secret, and Shiv tells Tom, who tries his very best to be happy because he actually wanted to be CEO, but instead he gets Fox News, ATN. There's this great scene later on where Tom is meeting with this very far-right conservative who's joining the network and tries to subtly interrogate him.
Okay, and this other one that came up, just to fend this off, have you ever read Mein Kampf?
Yeah, a couple times, I guess.
Couple times? Are there Easter eggs in there you didn't get the first time?
It's the same episode where there's a building lockdown due to a shooting in the building, which turns out was an employee who themselves right there in the office. And we get some of the best Tom and Greg scenes the show has to offer, because Greg isn't exactly happy about having to work at ATN. It's against his principles.
Seriously, okay, name me one principle that you have.
I don't know, like I'm against racism.
Oh, I'm against racism. Everybody's against racism. What else? Nazis, terrible, right?
Nazis?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the worst.
Shiv starts coming into the company, and let me tell you, Shiv with the haircut.
You got a haircut.
Yeah.
I hate it.
That's because it's stylish.
Completely different person. She also completely changes her style, which represents how she is stepping into the limelight in a new way, because she was kind of in the back burner last season. She and the brothers start fighting for Logan's attention. Roman goes as far as to take the Waystar Royco management program after talking to Jerry, who recommends it to him so that he can be taken seriously. And then they have really weird bone sex because Roman has extreme mommy issues. Extreme. You would think that he's definitely the youngest child, but it's Shiv. The writers have confirmed it. I can't believe it. Roman is older than Shiv. Waystar Royco takes a company retreat, which is really just an excuse for Logan to try and sniff out who was, quote, informing against him, as someone wants to write a biography about him, and already has gotten an inside source. Can you guess who it is? Greg. He makes them play Born on the Floor, which is, you know what, just roll the clip. Waystar continues to fight the takeover, and Logan plans to buy Pierce Media, which, if the Roys are the Murdoch family, then Pierce is the Bancrofts, okay, who did sell Wall Street Journal to the Murdochs. They represent, you could say, true generational old money. I'm talking plantations, I'm talking railroads, as opposed to the Roys, who are technically new money. Logan did start from nothing. It is actually what causes that massive generational divide between him and his kids, making everything so impossible between them. What he wants is for them to succeed with the opportunities that he never had, but he only had that grind and that hustle mindset because of what he didn't have. It is an impossible thing, but he expects them to somehow have the same source of and thus level of motivation. Each of his kids have a part of him within them, but not enough to fully be him, which is unveiled throughout the course of the show as their characters continue to be developed. Kendo has the business talents and experience, but he lacks killer instinct. Shiv has his gall and gumption and intelligence, but no experience, and I would say not enough of a true desire to really run the company. And Roman has the raw, true motivation, but neither the intelligence nor the experience. And Connor Roy was interested in politics from a very young age. So the Roy family goes to see the Pierce family, and they have this really fun, everyone meets their other half in the family, cozies up to them moment. Nan Pierce, who is the matriarch head of the family, decides, yes, she is willing to sell, but only if Logan names Shiv as his successor. She's a woman and she's liberal. And see, at dinner the night before, Shiv had accidentally let it slip that her dad had chosen her, which really upset him. And if he had any intention of truly making her CEO, it was gone after that moment. When asked by Nan, he refuses. I think he really just wanted his kids all fighting for his attention. He doesn't really want them to run the company, and I don't think he even knows that he doesn't want them to run the company. He thinks that none of them have what it takes, and he might be right, but it's also his fault. He was a terrible mother. He still is. What I quite enjoy about the show is that it is at its core a fundamental, overbearing immigrant parent perpetually dissatisfied with their children because what they truly want is either a second chance at life or for their kids to supersede them while resenting everything that they have been able to have in place of them. A conflicting dynamic that is impossible to satiate. And that is why I can enjoy the show even if there are no Black people, because tell me that's not any immigrant parent and their kids. Also, Shiv looks so good in that scene where she and Logan argue and he essentially makes it clear to her that she's never going to be CEO. Where is that top from? The fashion nerds can find everything but this one for some reason. Now, this whole time, Logan has been talking with the CEO of Pierce to help this deal go through. But then remember that cruise scandal that I told you to remember from season 1 that was allegedly laid to rest? It wasn't actually laid to rest, and someone is coming forth with their story. This, of course, ends the deal when the media leaks it, the deal to buy Pierce, and it all comes to fruition at Argestis, a conference where the entire company goes, and where Tom and Greg get up to some Tom and Greg antics, and Shiv and Kendo embarrass the company during the panel. Also, Roman was there too. Logan loses it on Roman and loses it on Nan after losing the deal. And then Raya, the Pierce CEO, starts working with Logan a little bit more, if you catch my drift, which enrages his current wife. And she is just not the woman to piss off, I feel. I mean, look at her. She's terrifying. She has that casual vibe to her where she never really raises her voice, but she packs so much power. And I mean, that woman means business. Okay? The kids decide to band together to stop Rhea. She throws Logan a surprise birthday party, which he hates. Roman buys him a football team, but it's the wrong one. And Kendall performs a rap that is hands down one of the best scenes in this entire show. It's literally why I started watching the show. I mean, I saw the Emmy wins and I saw this scene casually online. And I said, oh, this is the show for me. Eminem, then at the scene, we have a new famous white male rapper, and there's only room for one. Shiv encourages Logan to name Raya as his successor simply because she knows the cruise scandal is about to break loose, and this is going to transition from being a rumor into a full-blown criminal lawsuit. And who wants that heat? Definitely not her. Raya immediately ends up resigning, and they all end up embroiled in congressional hearings where we get some of the most iconic and heavily memed seeps from throughout the entire show.
I'm sorry.
If it is to be said, so it is.
They tried to blame it on Lester, recently passed head of cruises from during the time of the scandal. Lester, who they nicknamed Mo, as in Mo Lester, because they all knew about his criminal acts, but no one gave a damn. Earlier in the season, Connor actually has to go to Lester's funeral to give a eulogy in which he literally has nothing good to say. That man had a wife and kids who were there.
Lester was a man. And when a man dies, it is sad.
Roman also gets held hostage, which is so random. While everyone else is away at the congressional hearings, he's trying to find some company to take Royster Roca private and to get them out of this situation, but he gets held hostage, so that unfortunately goes nowhere. I always forget about this part. And then the company goes on a yacht trip where they had this hilarious discussion about who's going to take the fall for cruises, where everyone tries to subtly excuse themselves while passing off blame. Like, I would love to do it. I would do anything for you, Logan, and you know that. I just don't think that I work. They're going to want a bigger fish. than me. Why not this other person instead? A lot of the scene was actually improvised. If you look at it side by side with the script, it is completely different. And that is what I mean about the perfect casting in this show. Everyone knows the assignment, everyone knows their character, and they know them so, so, so well that they can have these moments of improv, which happen quite a lot. I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that the director would just tell them to improvise a lot of scenes and just have cameras going around picking things up and then putting everything together in a lot of the montage scenes we have where everyone's actually in the same place. Also, Tom eats Logan's chicken in the scene, which is so funny out of context and even funnier in context because there is no context. Ultimately, Logan ends on Kendo. Now, Kendo has been moping around this entire season like a little baby after his dad put the damn binky in his mouth after the events of the season 1 finale. And something else important is that Shiv recommends that Tom takes the fall. Her husband, by the way, she recommends that he go to jail, and he is heartbroken by this. He is so sad by this. I almost feel bad for him, but I mean, I can only feel so bad for these characters. They're so rich, so privileged. They have a argument, which is the culmination of all their marriage issues thus far, starting from the open marriage discussion to Tom feeling underappreciated and mistreated, which he is, but he did also kind of pursue Shiv because he's a clout chaser. It's complicated. Basically, their marriage is on the rocks. Kendo finally snaps out of it, and during the press conference, blames it on Logan with the proof that Greg has from season 1. And that is how we end season 2. Probably my favorite season, to be honest. This season starts with Kendo effectively on the run and trying to recruit his siblings. All of whom are either too scared or don't trust Kendo enough. How sad. What Logan was very effective at doing was keeping his kids at each other's throats. Thirsty for his affection, even Greg ends up switching sides, which upsets his father, who cuts him out of his will and leaves his millions to Greenpeace instead. So Greg tries to sue Greenpeace. Cousin Greg. Tom offers himself up to Logan because he is also desperate for his affection and attention, only to literally freak out the entire rest of the season about the potential of going to jail. And they would tear him apart. They would. And I don't think he would go to white-collar jail because they weren't financial crimes. They were bad ones. They were the bad crimes that they were covering up on those cruise ships. Now, the takeover is still ensuing, and so we have this interesting dynamic where Kendo is fighting the takeover, but also fighting Logan. So they're on the same side against Stewie and Sandy, but on opposite sides of each other as well. And this is a situation that annoys their shareholders, including Adrian Brody, who decides that he is going to vote against him, especially when he invites them out to his private island. And Logan nearly passes out on a hike, and Kendo is less than a good attentive son about it. At the shareholder meeting, they stall to make a deal before the shareholders have to actually vote on the takeover because they're certain they'll lose if it gets to that point. Logan kind of loses it because he didn't take his meds, and Sandy is also unwell, so he has to communicate through his daughter, who is also named Sandy. Shiv and Sandy end up kind of making the deal, getting themselves both board seats, which Logan is not grateful for. Also, at the meeting, the president tells them that he is no longer running for re-election because of ATN's retaliation against him for not stopping the federal investigation. So, next stop is a trip to some political meeting where they literally pick the next president of the United States of America, or at least the Republican candidate that they're going to back. Remember, Connor is still kind of running for president on the sole platform of no taxes for the rich. They pick someone else. Someone Shiv hates because she's kind of liberal, and this guy's basically the worst. She's actually kind of upset about it, so maybe this liberal thing is not kind of a phase for her. But she is still a Roy. Certain the second someone brought up the idea of higher taxes for the rich and universal healthcare, she would go right back to the other side. Now, throughout the season, after losing the Pierce deal, they were attempting to buy this other company Gojo, kind of a stand-in for Google, but also they do streaming, so also kind of Netflix. It's run by a very eccentric Swedish man played by Alexander Skarsgård who keeps doing things to make them concerned. Roman is kind of the inside guy on this, and him and Kendo both try to get Madsen's attention at Kendo's midlife crisis. I mean, his 40th. Eventually, Madsen reveals that he actually wants a merger of equals, and at the meeting where the gang is discussing this with Logan, Roman accidentally sends a pic meant for Jerry to his dad. Classic Succession. I can't say that it has that much bearing on the plot moving forward, but I had to include it anyways. Turns out Kendo did kind of underpromise on those papers, so the investigation ends. Logan is free, Tom is free and very, very grateful. And now it's time for another UK wedding. This time, their mother is getting remarried to apparently a speed stiffer. Connor proposes to Willow, who doesn't say yes or no, but later she says yes. Tom and Shiv's marriage continues to get worse while at the wedding. Lucas posts that he's getting into sports betting or something. I don't know. The business dealings confuse me. Okay. I made it clear in the beginning. We're not getting an explanation on that from me, at least. They go to talk to him, Logan and Roman, that is, to make sure they secure the deal. But then Lucas decides he wants to buy them. He thinks he's the future and that they're the past. And Logan, mother effing Roy, for some insane reason, agrees to this after 3 whole seasons of fighting to keep the company under his and familial control. He finally realizes it's time to move on, I guess, and that he no longer has what it takes to keep it going. The kids band together to prevent the sale to Gojo, during which Kendo confesses about the kid that he sort of killed.
You've killed the kid, right?
Yeah.
Kendo has been spiraling at this point in the season. He threw that massive 40th birthday party in which he had a mental breakdown at the end of it. He started dressing a bit differently and he nearly drowns while out in the UK. The siblings finally band together, actually planning on using the supermajority that they won from their parents' divorce settlement to outvote their dad, only to find out that Logan had gotten the jump on them and reopened and renegotiated the divorce settlement. They've lost. But how? How did he know the ambush was coming? Because Tom told him. Judas should have called him on their way there because she thought she could trust her husband, but she couldn't. We also get to this scene after that disgusting brothers Succession canon for sure. And the final scene of the season is Shiv finding out, not cool, Tom. I mean, it's just the dynamic between them is so complicated and also so well done, and that they both kind of suck and so they both kind of deserve it, but you also do feel bad for it because what they're doing is wrong to each other, and this is not how a husband and wife should treat each other. But the acting. The acting. The kids are working together now, and it's kind of cute. They're considering starting their own company, and then they decide that they're just going to buy Pierce and outbid their dad with the money that they're going to win from the Gojo deal. It turns out they were going to still buy Pierce with Soroke, that is. I guess that's possible because part of the Gojo deal is that they still get to keep ATN. I'm going to give them benefit of the doubt and say that this makes sense. I just personally don't get it. And that shows how much respect I have for Succession because I never assume that the fault lies with me. And I've watched way too many silly shows to not assume that these writers are not just writing out the sides of their mouths. So they managed to outbid Logan, which upsets him, teehee. But not before we get the amazing I love you, but you are not serious people scene. I quoted that line every single day for months after the first season aired. Meanwhile, Tom and Shiv have been separated after his betrayal, but dun dun dun, she's pregnant. Logan misses his kids on his birthday, but would never admit it, and he even misses Connor's wedding to fly to Europe to complete the Gojo deal. Then we get one of the best Succession episodes, because this is the episode that Logan dies. For real this time. On the plane to Europe, he has a heart attack or something. And he dies. His kids are talking to them on the phone as it happens, and the entire 20-minute plus scene was shot in one take on film, which is very, very impressive because you can't actually shoot on film for that long, so they had to hide rolls of film around the set. There's some impressive cinematography and choreography even to dodge in and out and avoid other cameras and replace the film sets. It was perfection. It was very shocking. Season 4 is actually the only season that I watched as it was airing, and I was shocked. Looking back now, of course, he was going to die at some point. He was supposed to die in the very first episode, but wow, it was such a markedly different episode. Very, very emotionally charged, insane acting, very well-deserved Emmys. No words. No words. Connor still gets married after this, making them the healthiest relationship in the show. And the kids have to figure out what to tell the press while grieving their father. Shiv agrees to let Kendo and Rogan go CEO and COO and have to do something that she never wants to do, which is trust others. They have to figure out what to do now in terms of selling the company and finishing their dad's deal, which they have to do while also planning and attending a funeral. There's this whole debacle where Logan may or may not have named Kendo his successor in his will. Unclear. But then they, and by they I mean Kendo and Roman, who keep this very pointedly from Shiv, decide that they do not want to actually sell the company, which is consistent. Roman fires Jerry for no reason at all and then unfires her. Fun fact, Jerry is actually Shiv's godmother. Don't know how that happened. When Shiv realizes that her brothers don't want to sell, she plays double agent with Mattson. She and Tom almost get back together, but then at a dinner party at their apartment get into a huge fight during which Tom says, I think you are maybe not a good person to have children when she's pregnant, which he doesn't know yet. I think at some point when she does tell him, he even accuses her of lying, which is just where their relationship has gone. Then we have election night. So they now have different stakes because they hope that the next candidate is going to block the Gojo deal. The candidates are Joe Evis and Jared Mencken, the guy that they chose last season, nearly bringing Shiv to tears. They are friends with Mencken, so he'll stop the deal for them, and they want him to win, even though democracy is literally at stake. It's a very bleak interpretation of the facade of America and the good old US of A. It's all a business deal. Money wins at the end of the day. Power wins at the end of the day. Do you think you have a choice? Get up. Connor, who was still running for president, concedes and endorses Mencken for an ambassadorship, which is exactly what Robert F. Kennedy did with Trump. And then ATN decides to call up the election in favor of Mencken, even though there was some tussle with the ballots being lost, set on fire, something. That also happened in real life. Although that did happen with the 2020 Trump Biden election, I believe so before the season aired, doesn't count as fortune telling. At some point, the boys find out that Shiv was actually informing for Mattson, and that's why she was going so hard against Mencken, and that her high horse morality virtue signaling did in fact have ulterior motives. All this for Mencken to switch sides in terms of not allowing the Gojo deal to come through. He tells Mattson that he'll allow the deal if Mattson names an American CEO, and he picks Shiv. There's also a very intense funeral episode where Roman fails to give a eulogy because he breaks down, and so Kendo and Shiv have to do it. Ewan actually gives quite the eulogy where he unveils Logan's entire life story and also criticizes him for, not being a good person. It's quite fascinating. Succession is a dark comedy and has many unserious moments, but the moments where it is serious are very, very well done because they're still in line with the style of the show, which so clearly knows what it's going for and what it's trying to do. And it's that it doesn't really have any specific messaging. It's not telling you to think any one specific thing. It's just giving you these awful, well-crafted, well-done characters who are defined in proximity to each other, which is how you have a good drama, and just lets you enjoy them. Lucas and Tom then go to dinner, where Lucas tells Tom that he wants to sleep with his wife, and then he offers him the role of CEO because he thinks he'll be easier to control than Shiv. And then Greg finds out by using a freaking translator app on the Swedes and then tells Kendo. So the siblings band back together. They're currently at their mom's house because Kendo and Shiv went to get Roman after his public breakdown after the funeral to get him to vote on their side during the shareholder meeting. There's always some freaking shareholder meeting. Oh no, this is a board meeting. My fault. That's different. Then Shiv realizes that she's being given the boot, and so they reluctantly decide to go for Kendo. And they have this nice moment, but it doesn't last for long because later on, there's an insane scene where they're voting, and then Shiv runs out the room right before she's supposed to vote. And then Kendo and Roman run after her, and she says she just can't do it. She can't stand to see Kendo win, apparently, and they get into a huge fight, actually a physical one, and this is where we get the "I am the eldest boy" line, and then Shiv runs back to vote against Kendo because he literally puts his hands on her. So Tom is the new CEO. He forgives Greg. Deal is signed. Tom and Shiv have some sort of moment in the car, and Kendo stares out over the water depressingly. It was supposed to feel bad, even though he literally just made several more billions. The show. My interpretation of the ending is that it being the worst possible outcome for Kendo is exactly what classifies it as a tragedy, and it's perfectly reasonable for the show to end right then and there because the company is no longer under Roy control. There's no more of that battle for succession. I think that Shiv betrayed Kendo primarily because she just couldn't stand to lose to him. She couldn't stand to have everything she thought was meant to her be given to Kendo, and she couldn't stand to see him replace their dad. She would rather take her chances with her estranged baby daddy. Yeah. Now that we've watched the show together, let's talk about some other stuff. The fashion. Succession was very well known for its fantastic fashion, spotting many Instagram accounts uniquely dedicated to identifying what each item of clothing was from. The outfits were very, very intentional and said a lot about each character. For instance, Shiv's style completely changes after the first season when she decides she actually wants to start working for the family and transitions out of her liberal era and of more of a background character to more of an actual contender for the spot of CEO. Kendo usually wears suits, wearing more outlandish outfits during his midlife crisis era. Roman literally wears children's clothes sometimes. Willow wears flashy designer as she wants to fit in, and Kendo's ex-wife wants to distance herself from him and the family, and it shows in her wardrobe. Lucas dressed as stereotypical new money and eccentric genius, and Connor was interested in politics from a very young age. The succession fashion literally triggered the old money trend that literally took TikTok by storm. Even though the Roy family is decidedly not old money, they do dress very well. Now, the Pierce family is actually old generational money, and the episode where they all meet and interact is where we can see the drastic differences between a family that has had money for so long that although they take it for granted just a little bit, they do respect it and understand the power that it holds, versus a family that never really thinks about money and spends it carelessly because why not? Which I would argue is the two different types of people when it comes to money. Not exactly rich versus poor, but respecting it versus not. Succession fashion was quite pivotal in highlighting fashion brands that are not overwhelmingly marketed to the masses and to different socioeconomic classes of people in order to optimize profit margins. It wasn't just Gucci and Louis Vuitton brands that cater to the middle class and presents a fantasy that people can buy into at any price range. It was Ralph Lauren, Max Mara, Giorgio Armani, Mike Kors, Alexander McQueen, and Tom Ford, the true old money brands that sell to a very elite clientele and have actually somewhat maintained their reputations as high quality fashion brands. These are the brands that may not make as much money as LVMH, but will always be okay in a recession because their client base is probably comprised of the people who made the recession happen. It is interesting because these brands represent true old money versus true new money. Honestly, who really gives a damn? It's important for the show in terms of establishing who these people are, but I mean, money is money at the end of the day, in my opinion. It's all really fascinating. They clearly have a very strong conception of the role that fashion plays in crafting a character. What's very unique about Succession is the world that it creates. It's a deeply elitist, manipulative, and cold world where the audience is relegated to nothing more than a character on the inside. From the very first episode, you feel as if you are excluded. And looking in, you're thrust directly into the center of the action. No one explains anything to you. There's no blatant exposition. You're trying to catch up and figure things out. The cinematography of the shaky camera, the brilliant dialogue, the characters, what they wear, what they say, what they do, all serve to reinforce that we are spectators. We are not a part of this world. We are not meant to be a part of this world. There are so many articulate and poignant details contained in each episode that perfectly craft that ideology. And with it, everything comes together so well. The amazing cast that knows their characters so well, and the director that has such a clear idea of what it is he wants, and the writers and the producers and everything. We are supposed to be scrambling to consume and understand this content, and definitely not meant to be enjoying these characters, but we do love to hate them. And so, without further ado, let's end this video off with a character analysis. Most of the characters in succession, if not all, can be understood directly in proportion to Logan Roy. So let's start with him. In the last season, at Logan's funeral, his brother Ewan gives a eulogy in which he recounts Logan's life story that the audience was previously not privy to, and this is where the balance of succession really comes into play, because we have been able to understand him as a character and the core essence of who he is and everything that he stands for simply through performance and character dynamics. We didn't have to know all of these details. Yes, it makes everything make more sense, but it was still clear from beforehand. Logan was born in Scotland, and him and his brother were sent to live in Canada with their Uncle Noah during the war. While they were crossing over, the ship that they were hiding in went adrift for 2 days, leaving the boys trapped and forced to remain still and silent, having been told that any movement would allow the U-boats to detect and kill them. When they arrived, Logan was sent to boarding school but begged to come home because he hated it. And when he came home, he was sick, and his baby sister contracted polio, which he blamed himself for, and he never quite forgave himself when she passed away. And his uncle and aunt did nothing to absolve him of that belief. After his father's death, he inherited the money that he used to start and eventually build his empire. However, he grew more and more distant from his brother, who judged him for being, well, a terrible person. Logan Roy is a formidable man. He is a brilliant businessman who loves his kids in a loveless way, and mostly sees them as extensions of himself that disappoint him because they could never live up to what he has done. I'm going to reiterate what I said before. Logan is no different from any other immigrant parent, just parent with a massive generational divide between them and their kid who cannot connect with them, who are tarnished by it, but also plagued by a deep regret to redo elements of their life, which they hoped that their kids would soothe, but they can't. That's impossible. It's an impossible task. Nobody can help you redo your life. And so, in their eyes, the kid is never enough, really. It is through this specific dynamic that we can analyze all the other kids, each desperate for their father's love and attention, each craving power for that reason above all, each having parts of their father, but not enough. Kendall Roy has been raised as the eldest boy, in a sense, because Connor is a joke, and thus raised to take everything for granted, creating his baseless sense of entitlement that lacks true grit and talent, makes him such a disappointment to his father. He wants the company, and in some senses he would run it very well, but he just doesn't have the killer instincts, the guts that Logan had. No one really did, honestly, and that's what made Logan different from everyone else. He doesn't have any true motives out of life besides wanting to please his father, which is true of all his siblings. He doesn't care about media or even preserving his family legacy. He just wants the title. Succession reads as Game of Thrones in that sense, a thirst for power and bloodthirsty vengeance, motives that are no more complex than that. Kendo was no golden boy, however, having addiction issues and overall lacking the spine. Each of his efforts to take down his father ultimately fails, as he simply does not have what it takes. Take the boardroom meeting in season 1, in which he did make it to the vote of no confidence because he ran off to Long Island last second to get a vote. Why did he not do that before? Why didn't he think ahead? Logan had thought ahead. Meanwhile, Shiv is actually Logan's favorite, mostly by virtue of being a girl and thus not facing that tough father-son dynamic that her brothers do. However, her being a woman also is constantly used against her, and despite her objectively being the smartest of the kids, that means nothing when she lacks the business experience, and she is a woman, which is something that's really clearly highlighted in the last season when she gets pregnant, and that's something that probably would have used against her if she became CEO. Shiv is the only one who disappoints her father, not by not being good enough originally, but by simply refusing to work in the business. And once he manipulates her into coming in, ironically, he can instantly see that she does not have what it takes to run the company, because if she did, she wouldn't have been so easily manipulated. Logan constantly traps his kids in these catch-22 situations that simply prove that nothing could ever satisfy him, because what he wants is impossible. Take Roman, who is the most likely of the kids to slither back to Logan time and time again, and how angry Logan is when Roman has the audacity to ask for what he wants. Roman's most prominent character trait is being a degenerate sexually, yes, but also being a screw-up. If Kendall, being older, was forced to assume the pressure of being the golden boy, which he ultimately cracks under, Roman fell victim to not getting enough attention, being that he still acts out in desperation as an adult. A little therapy would have gone a long way. And I have not forgotten about Connor. It is a joke within the show itself that everyone constantly forgets about Connor, but he, I think, honestly, more so than the rest of the characters, represents that wildly out of touch with reality person who Connor is almost a caricature and represents something about the elite in our society, in that he is a gateway to understanding something about us, about American democracy, about the elites, and about the undue power that money has and how dangerous that can be when the money is not substantiated by intelligence, talent, or any of the things that we have as a society deemed worthy of having money and success, and things that we still think are what it takes to be rich, because we're still not ready to admit that democracy and meritocracy, it's a facade. It's a facade. It ultimately correlates into the ending of the show, where the siblings simply cannot manage to come together because they've been pitted against each other their entire lives. And so Logan Roy continues to exert undue control and pull the puppet strings from beyond the grave. There are a lot of parallels between Succession and real life. It came out during the time of a lot of political turmoil, and it's based on a lot of real things, real life events and people. And so it is no surprise that it does kind of predict a lot of different things. The politics and the election that is ultimately undermined by power using their media connections and money really going to show how much media has become important in deciding of political progress. And money has always been important. Power has always been important. These are the true things that can supersede any semblance of democracy in the world we live in. It shows the rise of new age media to replace the old, the anxieties about the role of legacy media in a shape-shifting landscape. It was a very well-timed show, I think, and it will be remembered as having been a defining show of our era, a time capsule with which to understand what it meant to be an American at this point in time. In the future, we'll look back on the show and think, wow, yeah, some of those things really did ring true, and they continue to ring true. So, is it the most important show of our time? I'll let Connor Roy tell it.
Hey, if you want to print something in your little book, you may print the following line. Connor Roy was interested in politics at a very young age.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you are still here, you are a superstar. Make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment down below. Tell me what other shows you want to see a deep dive into, and I will see you so soon.